Welcome back to the 40% Better podcast. I'm your host, Bill. As always, we're talking about leadership, mostly in the technology space, but this stuff applies broadly everywhere. Justin has graciously accepted our invitation to join us and talk about his journey in the technology world and leadership role. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Great to be here.
Thank you. I guess the first question that I'm going to ask, which is the one I ask everybody, is how did you get started in leadership? Like, what's your origin story?
Yeah, it's always an interesting one, right? Because like there's this thing in our industry that like you have to have leadership before you can get leadership. So you kind of have a chicken or an egg problem, right? I find, which is always fascinating to me. It's like, oh, you need to have 20 years of experience to get an entry-level job. How's that going to work?
Right.
But yeah, I kind of got into it by doing what we called a tech lead, where it was more like I was leveraging my technical expertise and skill set to be a leader on the team, but didn't have any direct managerial responsibilities. Like didn't have to do performance reviews, didn't hire people, didn't, fire people, didn't have to let them go. But was like a technical leader on the team was sort of my first, what I would call leadership role. And then, I guess I must have done that successfully because then they moved people under me and had people managing me. That was at a previous company. And then when I moved over to my current company, to Kentik, took on leadership roles. I've been in leadership roles pretty much the whole time I've been here at the new company.
Nice. Yeah. Did you have any kind of training around leadership? Anything? Or they just kind of throw you in the fire?
I would say, not formal from leadership training from the company per se, but like I did get an MBA, so I have an education in business and administration and leadership, and I've done a lot of like reading and training on my own. I believe very heavily in a growth mindset and continuing to like evolve the skill set, and so a lot of the books that I wind up reading, a lot of the podcasts I listen to are on different aspects of leadership. So it's been sort of like, I guess, self-taught in that way, if you will, nothing formal from the employer necessarily.
Nice. The nice thing about the taking that self-taught kind of approach is you get to pick and choose what you want to go learn, right? There's a lot of different areas where you could deep dive and, you get to force rank what's exciting for you. With that in mind, what kind of leadership philosophy stuff has stuck in your head?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. The 40% better concept, like just continuing to take a little bit at a time and improve just a little bit day over day, has really resonated with me. And like you said, the advantage of kind of doing it yourself is you can decide, okay, this is an area where I've gotten consistent feedback I can improve, and I'll figure out, books I can read, podcasts I can listen to. Actually, LinkedIn Learning has some really great courses on leadership too, if folks have access to that, to figure out areas where, you can improve, whether it's public speaking skills or it's having tough conversations when you're coaching your team, whatever it may be. There's just so much, great stuff out there. It just depends on what area you want to work on. But I always encourage people, pick one thing at a time, and work on that and then move on to the next thing.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. The Kaizen idea, get a tiny bit better every day. To me, it just, it seems so, it's not scary. No, I mean, that's it's like in my experience, like I can talk with the team about that and nobody gets worried about it. Because they're like, oh, we're only doing small changes. Whereas if I'm like, hey, we're going to completely change this thing, it's going to be a giant procedural, whatever, people are used to the existing process and they're like, and there's friction, but if it's like, oh, we're just these little tiny pieces, then nominal friction, if any, and that makes it much, much easier.
And I think, another analogy I like to use is like, I don't know if you've ever done competitive running. I'm not necessarily a great runner, but I've done some 5Ks and 10Ks. And inevitably, I'll be out on the course running my pace, and somebody older than me looks like they're probably not in as good a shape as I am, passes me, and I'm like, my ego wants me to try and like keep up with them or stay ahead of them, right? And I have to remind myself that like this race is not about me versus them. This race is about me versus what I was capable of doing the last time I ran this race, right? It's about me improving myself and getting better race over race, not outrunning the other people on the course, which is really tough for me to swallow my ego and do. But I think the same thing comes from leadership and career development, where like you can look at you know Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or some famous tech entrepreneur and business person and be like, oh, how do I get from here to where they are? That's probably not the right analogy. The right analogy is like, how do I get better than I was yesterday or last week or last month or last year, right?
Yeah, yeah. And what was the price they paid to get to where they're at? That's kind of the part of the conversation that people
Oh,
don't
100%. Yeah.
don't bring up.
Right.
How hard do you want to work to get that thing? And I think oftentimes for people like that, there's hidden things that they've worked on that aren't necessarily obvious.
Hmm.
Because there's the public persona, and then there's what goes on behind the scenes, and you we don't have access to that, and we don't know.
It's one of the disadvantages of modern society with social media, right? Is most people put their best selves on social media, right? So all you see, to your point, is like all the good, right? And all the
Yeah,
things they've accomplished and the achievements and so forth. You don't see what did it take to get there? What were the 8 failures before the one success, right? Because they
right.
don't go out and post about all the 8 failures. They only
Yeah,
post about the inevitable success, right? But
yeah,
that's not
yeah,
where the story began.
yeah. There was an article that I read about Michael Phelps,
Hmm.
and he talked about how, I want to say, for 2 or 3 years, he trained every single day. He had 0 days off, felt good, felt bad, birthday, holiday, Christmas, New Year's, like whatever it was, he was training every single day. And I was thinking, man, that is a price. Like,
Hmm.
that's that is a serious investment in your craft to be willing to do that. Um, and I don't think people wrap their head around that, about
Hmm.
around that. It's like that level of effort. Yeah. Um, Back to the kind of the philosophical things. What were some of the, like, early on, some of the things that you learned you were like, "Oh, that's not what I expected, but I see how it makes sense," other than tiny improvements?
Yeah, I think I guess I just like looked at people who were in leadership who were doing a really good job, and maybe it's back to the same point, which is like I just thought that they were like somehow born differently, right? It's like, oh, they just are naturally really good at this. When I got into leadership, I realized that they're people too. They have their own challenges, their own flaws. Like, they even struggle with their own imposter syndrome, feeling like they're not good enough and constantly have to work hard to measure up, right? Like even the most successful people have some of those same, you know, struggles internally that they're dealing with, right? I think that was maybe one of the bigger aha moments when I started being able to spend time with people who were in the C-suite and get a chance to talk to them. And they're like, "Oh yeah, I went through that same thing where I wasn't sure what to do or how to handle this or that situation, and it was a real struggle." And so, yeah, we're all
That's a
people.
good
We're
one.
all trying to figure this experience out together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a really good one. I think everybody has imposter syndrome when they start. Either that, or they have the Dunning-Kruger thing going on, you know?
Yeah,
That's the other
yeah.
the other side of it, where they think they're a genius and everybody around them hates life. Yeah, I had really bad imposter syndrome when I started. I really
Hmm.
could not figure out, um I didn't understand when I started leading my first software team why the team worked so well. Um, because I thought that what I was doing was what everybody was doing.
Mhm.
And I didn't have the breadth of experience to be able to recognize that I was doing anything different. Um, and then like I kind of had a clue when I left that company, and everybody on my team emailed me and said, "Can we? Where are you going? We want to come work for you." And I was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
um, I was super surprised about that. That was a shock, and I was like, "Okay, must be doing something right." So yeah,
Yeah,
um,
I think one of the other aha moments that I had was, um, feeling like I had to know everything or have an answer for everything. So, like, when people on your team would come to you with a problem, early on in my leadership journey, I felt like, oh, I have to be able to fix everything. I have to be able to fix all the problems that they come to me with, right? And I learned very quickly, like, there's a couple things you could do. One is you can redirect. Like, I may not know the answer, but maybe, at least one of my superpowers as a leader is knowing the organization really well, knowing what everybody in the organization does and being able to help redirect them to, like, oh, I don't know the answer to that one, but this other person over here, that they're the best person to talk to about that. Like, they could help you with that. That's one thing that, I've been able to develop, to not have to know everything and have the answer. And the other thing is, sometimes you don't have to fix the problem. Sometimes just being there to listen and so that they feel heard, is enough, right? Sometimes people just are frustrated and need to vent a little bit and be like, yeah, I hear you. That is a challenge. And, we will see if we can work together to make it better, but let's focus on what we can control. Right.
yeah, yeah. That's yeah. There was a few things that I think are really important. One of them is really knowing other people in the business,
Hmm.
other stakeholders, and being able to tell people, hey, if you ask Mary, she might, she probably knows how that stuff works. Um, when you're, how did you develop that skill to know and be familiar with other people in the business?
I think it's one of the things I just always really enjoyed, even before I was a leader, was getting to know other people in the business. Now, to be fair, in the current company I work for, we're only like 200 and I think about 230 employees, right? So it's a little easier than when you're in, an Amazon size organization where there's a million people, right? So it's a little bit different, but just I spend a decent amount of time each week doing one-on-ones with, like, engineering leaders, product leaders, marketing leaders, sales leaders, just to get to know each other. And, like, a lot of those, I don't come in with like a really well defined agenda. I might come in with a couple things my team's struggling with to see if there's something they could do to help us with it or make sure they're aware of some challenges in the business. But a lot of times, it's just like, since we're a 100% virtual company as well, so we don't have the benefit of like a water cooler that you can chat with people around. So a lot of it's just a virtual version of that, where I'll come to the call and I'll be like, hey, what's your team working on? What's your focus for the next, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, like whatever. If we're doing a software sprint, like, what's the focus of the next software sprint that your team's working on, right? And sometimes an interesting tidbit comes out of that, where they're like, oh, we're prototyping this new functionality. Actually, I'd like to have your team take a look at it and give us some feedback on it, and it leads to some good conversations like that, to where, again, next time I'm talking to somebody on the team, they're like, I got a customer, they're really struggling with this. It's like, I happen to know who's working on that. I just talked to them a couple weeks ago. Like, go talk to, like you said, Mary. Her team's working on that right now, as it turns out. So you should check out the prototype they're building. That might be exactly what you're looking for, or at least it's close enough that maybe we can get some feedback from the customer and iterate on it quickly, right? So I think a lot
I,
of it's just being curious and having those conversations with other people to kind of look outside of your little world. Maybe is the way I would phrase it.
yeah, I like that. A lot of people in the tech world have varying degrees of social anxiety, and talking with other people in the company is not their strong suit. Did you
Yeah.
struggle with that, or do you have to get around that, or?
No, I guess, my personality type is just I've always been a bit of an extrovert. So I've always enjoyed even, and I'll call it quote unquote the old days, pre-COVID days when everybody was in an office and you collaborated in an office. It's actually one of my favorite parts about that environment was just wandering around and getting to know people and, connecting to people on a personal level, understanding what they're working on, what their role is in the organization and so forth. So it's always been something that I actually enjoy. But I hear you. Not everybody is an extrovert. Some people are introverts, and the thought of even doing that, like, fills them with a panic and anxiety. And if they were to force themselves to do it afterwards, like, okay, I need a nap now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I was one of those people. So, um, that was one of the things that the first team that I led, that my boss, who was the founder of the company, said, "Oh, by the way, you need to go learn more about how sales and marketing and operations and the sales support team, like how everybody works. So figure out ways to go talk to them." And I was like, "Oh my God, really? Oh no." And, in retrospect, that was great advice that he gave me,
hmm
because I got to learn, one, that those people weren't scary. And that, like, the sales team always had feedback about things that customers were asking for
hmm
that we hadn't thought about putting on the roadmap.
yep.
And so, I'd be like, "Oh, well, wait a minute, hang on, what's that worth to us? What's the revenue opportunity?" And that was a real game changer, I think, for how we were building the product.
For sure.
Um, just because we got to hear the voice of the customer,
hmm
indirectly from, talking to all these other people. And I thought that was super helpful.
Yeah. And I'm sure
Yeah.
somewhere you had a database where you theoretically tracked all of that, right? But it's a lot
Oh yeah.
easier said than done, and to capture that feedback in a database, right? To be able to talk to the salespeople that are on the front lines day in and day out and hear it unfiltered, you capture something that they probably didn't enter in some database when the customer said it, right?
Yeah. Well, we did have a CRM that I didn't have access to. So even if they were tracking it there, it wasn't gonna do me any good whatsoever, because I
Sure.
wasn't in the sales side of the house. But, that became a very comfortable thing where, we all were in the same building, or most of us were in the same building, and they would just walk over to my desk and be like, "Hey, I just got off a call with a prospect. They really want us to have X, Y, and Z. Can we even build it?
hmm
Because if we have it, then they'd love to work with us." And
Yeah.
that was back then, I had a whiteboard with sticky notes. That was my roadmap, was, very early primitive agile backlog. Um, and That was before I even knew agile was a thing. I just was like doing it because there was a system that worked for me that made sense.
Yeah.
That was,
Yeah.
yeah, we were young and innocent, and that worked well. Yeah. Um, when you've got, like, do you advise the folks that work for you that are running teams? Do you advise them to go talk to people, and like how do you spread that kind of knowledge through the org?
Yeah, I do. I have, I'm a manager of managers, so I have managers that work for me, and I encourage them to do the same thing. Is uh not I don't want not rely on me for everything. Like they'll come to me and be like, "Oh, can you go like excuse me, we need this answer from this VP over here. Can you go talk to them?" Like, "Well, I can. Sure." The answer to that question is yes. But I think you should reach out to them and copy me. Like you shouldn't like we're not the type of organization where you have to be a VP to talk to another VP. Like that kind of like closed door doesn't exist in this organization. So you should feel free to reach out to them. You don't have to have a VP title to talk to them. So reach out to them, ask the question. If you want to copy me, that's fine. But that way you kind of build your own relationships so that, you don't have to funnel everything through me. Right.
I like
And that
that.
can be a little bit of a different approach. I know not every organization works in the same manner, but it's also can be intimidating for people. They're like, well, but that person's a co-founder. It's like, yeah, but again, they're a person, they're human. And, maybe like Bill, they run a software organization and they love to hear feedback directly from the customers. And if you're dealing with, Fortune 100 customer that has, a couple minor tweaks to the product we could make that would make this even better than our competitors, they're going to want to know about that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good advice for people to build their own relationships and to recognize that, they're human. Um, and not to get hung up on the title thing. I don't remember ever working in a company where you had to be a VP to talk to a VP. And if that was a rule someplace, I didn't. I ignored it. And um and maybe it's because I think it's because I like multiple companies. I was technically the product manager, but de facto running the team. That was kind of the way that
Sure.
because I knew how to. Um, and wearing the product manager hat gave me kind of the flexibility to talk with anybody about anything. Like nobody ever said, "Oh, you can't do that because you're a product manager." That would just that never came up. And so I think people get I just never thought it was above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Although I did have to learn how to communicate differently.
Well, that's part of it
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Yeah. I think I don't know that I've ever worked in an organization where anybody would have come right out and said that if you're not a VP, you're not allowed to talk to a VP, but there was definitely sort of the culture, right? Where if you were an individual contributor and you shot a note off to a VP, they're going to be looking at that going, who is this person? Like, why are they contacting me? Right. I've definitely worked in organizations where that was sort of the culture, right? You had to follow kind of the chain of command and get, follow a certain process, right? To have those type of conversations. Cause at some point you start scaling an organization, you do have to have some sort of protecting of people's time. Right. But, yeah, to your point, that's another one that I think is a skill that you have to develop as a leader is, being able to deliver a message in the way that the person that you're delivering it to can accept it. And like, for example, I'm doing a talk here next month at a conference. It's a tech conference for people wanting to get into doing automation of network automation. And it's in the leadership track that I'm doing the talk. And the whole point of the talk is how do we as engineers who are trying to do network automation put it in terms that a CFO can understand, like, why should I greenlight this project? Why should I invest in this project? Right. And just because we as engineers think, well, of course it makes sense because it's nerdy and it's cool. And like, isn't this going to be so great when everything is done by itself and we don't have to have humans involved? A CFO doesn't give a two hoots about that, right? They want to know, like, okay, you're asking me to invest $1 million in a project to do this. What's my ROI? What's my timeline to return that plus some in profitability? And a lot of engineers are like, I don't even know what some of these financial terms mean, right? So I put together a talk to try and, bridge the gap a little bit and be like, okay, you don't have to have a degree in finance, but you do need to change your narrative to the point where you can say, okay, here's what this is going to cost us. Here's what it's costing us in man hours to do it today. And therefore, here's our break even point. Here's what our ROI looks like for investing in this. And things like that in order to be able to present it in the way that, in this case, a financial executive is going to be able to understand, oh, now I understand what these guys are talking about. Like this actually makes sense and I can understand the decision that needs to be made here on this.
Are you going to be recording that?
Yeah. Yep.
Because
all the talks, it's at a conference called Network Automation Forums, Automation Conference. So they're all recorded and will be posted on YouTube.
Okay. I think one of the things that I found was that the ability to get to the CFO. Like if you can pitch it to the CFO, you can pitch it to
Mm-hmm.
anybody in the executive suite.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to see your talk about that because I have my own methodology for doing that. That has worked really, really well for me
Mm-hmm.
so far. But I'm always curious to see how other people do that because there's not enough examples for people to look at of that uh, context switch from this is super cool and nerdy and to what's the ROI.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've been at multiple companies where I've gone into the C-suite to get money for something. I've used exactly what you're talking about. But my peers have been like, "How did you get the budget for that?" Like, what's like, I just asked for the exact same thing and got shut down. How did you get it? And the at the back in the day, I didn't realize that what I was doing was unusual.
Yeah.
Um, and I just figured everybody asked the same way that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it wasn't until I like relatively recently that I started really diving down the research track of how are people asking for money and why are they getting no's all the time? And what you're talking about to get the yes is like, I want another vector for people to look at that's not me saying it, it's somebody else, third party. But yeah, I think that's one of those key elements of leadership communication, especially when you're like a team lead,
Mm-hmm.
to be comfortable. And also do your own analysis and go, oh, wait a minute, this isn't very good ROI.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Maybe we shouldn't do it.
Yep.
I
Well,
think that
and that's what I was about to say. The other thing you have to remember is, so you walk into the CFO's office and you're asking for something, and let's say you've done the business case and you can explain what the ROI is and the payback period and all that kind of stuff. Guarantee you there was somebody else who just left the CFO office right before you asking for money. And right after you leave, there'll be somebody else coming in there asking for money. So their job all day long is to figure out what to say yes to and what to say no to, because they can't say yes to everything any more than, Bill, you and your family could say yes to everything you want to spend money on, or me and my wife can say yes to everything we want to spend money on. There are plenty of things we could, and there's a case to be made for everything that you should spend money on, but the budget is finite, right? Like there's not an unlimited amount of money. So it's like we have to figure out like what are the right business trade-offs to make, right?
right. Yeah.
And I think, early in my career, I was definitely guilty of thinking that like if the execs didn't get it, they were just dumb. Like, oh, this just makes sense. Like they must be, I must work for idiots if they can't figure this one out because this is just obvious. And like, I must just need to go work somewhere else because I must work for, idiots if they can't figure this out. And it's like I had the example I can think of as you were telling your story was I was working for a telecommunications company and we were wanting to expand into Europe, right? The engineering team was wanting to expand into Europe, and I had to explain to one of the executives why I thought we should expand into Europe, and I thought I'd done a good job of explaining it, but it was all in technical terms, right? Now I was explaining it to the CTO, to a technical exec. The answer was no. Then I went to actually to my boss who had been out of town when I explained it the first time, and said, "Hey, no, it was shot down." They said no on the European expansion, and he's like, "Well, why?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. He just said no. Like, I don't know why." He's like, "Well, did you explain to him how much we're paying to send our traffic from the United States to Europe today, and how by spending that money to expand into Europe, we're actually going to save money because we will be able to like decrease the traffic on those international links, which are really expensive?" I said, "Well, no, he's the CTO. Of course he would know that." And he was like, "Okay, we're going to see him next week when we're in Chicago at dinner." He's like, "I'll put together a quick, deck to send him in advance before dinner to explain all of that." And so like my boss, who was a VP at the time, was like, walked the CTO through all of it. It was like, "Okay, here, like in business terms, like here's what we're paying
Right.
today. Here's what we would pay to have, infrastructure there. Here's what we would save." It was like 3-year payback or something like that. And course, it was yes that time around, and I was just like, "How did he get a yes on the same proposal I got no on?" And as I watched him propose it at dinner, I was like, "Now I understand," because I just, didn't go into those level of details. I went into the details on like, what brand of equipment we were going to buy and that kind of stuff, right? Which was irrelevant to the message that we were trying to deliver.
Yeah, and that's such a. I think that's a really common thing for people in the tech world to do that
Mm-hmm.
haven't learned how to switch. For me, the reason that I started doing it was because the guy that I worked for started asking me all the financial questions. Like he
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say no. The first couple times I'm in, I was like, "Hey, I want money to buy blah 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 because uh, it'll help us
Because,
operate better."
yeah.
Yeah, because the team thinks it'll help us operate better, and he would say, "Well, what's the cost? How is it going to help you operate better? How much? What's the person hour time savings, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And he basically asked me all these ROI questions, and he had like a script. And so after like 5 times of getting the same script over and over again, I finally got the message. Oh, wait a minute. If I preload all 5 of these and come in, I'll just have one meeting.
Right.
And,
Yep.
and, uh, you know, I went in and did it. And he was like, absolutely. Yes. Thank you for getting all the questions up front. If you do this from now on, then we'll just have, single meetings. It'll be great. And I was like, oh, okay. Magic. And I just did
Yep.
that to everybody ever since. Like every exec I've ever asked for anything since then, I basically used the same template. And yeah, and it's always about the money. It's never about the cool geek factor for the team, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Um, I like that you're getting people to get out and talk with um stakeholders in the company. Um, are there ever cases where you don't want that to happen?
Um, I wouldn't say there are cases where I don't want that to happen. I think it just needs to be done in a certain way. So one thing I always encourage my leaders is I'm okay with you having your own relationships and having your own conversations. Just keep me informed so that I don't get blindsided. Like what I don't want to have happen is they go, like, I don't know, let's just say they go and talk to a director, and that director goes to their VP, and then that VP comes to me and is like, what's going on? If I don't know anything about it, I don't know what, the details are, what the story is, I can't defend my team, I guess, for lack of a better term, right? I get caught off guard. And so I've just always asked my leadership team, keep me informed, make sure if I get questioned about it after the fact, I know what the ask is and why we're making the ask and can back you up, right? Um, Still not discouraging them from doing it. I just want to make sure that I'm informed, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that totally makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I think that freedom with the safety net is a really good message, um, to help people feel like they have autonomy in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I always worry when I hear people at companies say it's above my pay grade, and and what the way that you're approaching this sounds like no one would ever, like, they couldn't legitimately say that, you know, um, or it'd be very tiny corner case. And I don't think I think the message that you're putting out should be like all the time, every day, a flashing banner up on LinkedIn that nothing is above your pay grade. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I do encourage my team that like sometimes those decisions to be made are above our pay grade. Doesn't mean we can't be involved in the
Right.
conversation. We
Right.
can't bring the details and the information up the chain, if you will. But I tell
Right.
my team all the time, I'm like, once we've had a discussion, you've presented your case, a decision has been made, whether you agree with the decision or not, you've got to commit and get behind it, right? Because we had our chance to debate the pros, the cons, the other side of it. once the company's made a decision, it's our job as leaders to be the voice of those decisions to our team, right? You're welcome
Yeah.
to come to me and gripe about it. That's fine. But you need to put on a bold face to your team, right? That like, nope, this is the company's direction and the company's decision, and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Now, I mean, I think having that kind of support for your people is so critical. Um, because part of it is they get to model your behavior and ultimately advance their own careers. And I think that's one of those most people want to be able to advance their careers at some point in time.
yeah,
And so, hey, this is how Justin leads and this is what he teaches. And, uh, you know, now I've got somebody that I can follow and emulate.
yeah.
Yeah. I like that. That's good. Do you talk about your teams? Do you talk about this kind of stuff with your teams on a regular basis?
Uh, Not as much as I would probably like, because there's just so much going on how we run the business on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, I mean, um, I definitely encourage my team to continue to work on their own skill set. I've told my leaders before, like, I'm more than happy if someday you have my job, right? Like, hopefully I'll get an even better job, and the rising tide will raise all boats. But maybe someday I'll be working for you. Like, that's fine too. Like the goal here is for as a leader, the goal is always to help improve your people and make them better. And if that means they're better than you are, or they wind up taking your job, hey, whatever. That's kind of what success looks like, right? Or even leave the company. Something we, as leaders don't necessarily encourage. But I did have a guy on my team a number of years ago that I'll say kind of outgrew the organization. Like he was taken off, was doing really well. I'd coached him. He'd taken all the feedback and then more, and had really improved himself. And got an awesome offer from another company that we just couldn't match. And, I was like kind of proud of him. I was like, I hated to lose him. I hated to see him go. And I've a couple times tried to get him back, but his career has just really taken off. So that's not feasible at this stage. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah. I like that philosophy of helping your people grow. Man, I think that's a having that as a deliberate perspective and something you can verbalize.
hmm
I think that's awesome, and I think more folks in leadership roles should be able to say that out loud. Um, and yeah, I've had folks same thing where I've had somebody who came in, didn't know very much, started learning, got really good, got an offer I couldn't match.
hmm
Um, and yeah, yeah, and I think, and I'm super proud of everything he's accomplished too. Like he's totally
hmm
crushed it.
Yep.
Um, and I'm stoked I gave him his first software job. You know,
Yep.
got him
Yep.
started down the path, and and it's like that worked out really well for him. So, I got to play my part, and away he went. I think that's a good thing to do. Um,
Exactly. I think,
yeah,
not to be trite about it, but I think of it kind of like as a parent. Right?
yeah,
Like part of your role as a leader is similar to that of a parent, which is mentoring and shepherding and coaching people, right? And so if we think about it from that perspective and that analogy, like as a parent, if your child goes off and I don't know, I'm just going to make something up here, right? Goes to law school, graduates first in their class from Harvard Law, and is one of the best practicing lawyers in the country. What are you going to do? You're going to run and tell all your friends, "Oh, look at this! My son or my daughter is this famous lawyer that's done so well for themselves, and maybe I only had a small piece to do with that, but I'm so proud of them for what they've done." Like I feel like we should be the same as leaders, right?
yeah,
Like if someone works for us and they did a good job for us, but it springboarded them to an even better job and a better career in another place, and like they just take off and be, like that. We should feel proud about that, not like, oh, I failed because they left the organization. It's like sometimes that's just what people have to do because they want other things. They want to work with a company that has different product or different approach or different technology or whatever it may be, right?
right,
So
right.
there's So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that, that comparison between leadership and parenting. I think it totally makes sense. And again, I think that's one of those things that people don't deliberately talk about often enough, because it's easy to talk about wanting your kids to do really, really well,
Mhm.
and then to be really proud of their accomplishments, um, and to put that in the same context as workplace leadership, I think is a very empowering, mental model to have. Yeah, I
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, God, I'm trying to think what other you have good answers for questions. I like
Well,
it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
There's one
yeah.
thing we that I think is also we kinda got to this and then the conversation went another direction, which is I actually I'll almost say force my team to continually improve. So one of the things I implemented with my team is training goals every quarter, right? I do it for me, I do it for my leaders on my team, and I do it for the individual contributors downstream on my team. So everybody who reports up into my organization has a training goal every quarter. And at the beginning of the quarter, they get to decide what that is within reason. We have basically a list of things that we continue to curate of things that are relevant to what we do, whether it's public speaking skills. I run a pre-sales engineering team, so sales skills, technical skills, new tech that's coming out, whatever it may be. So there's a list of things that we maintain that they can pick from, pick their training goal, and then they've got the quarter to do it, 90 days to do it. It's typical. Most people wait till the last minute to do it, but whatever, that's fine. It's you know um so some of them enjoy it, some of them don't, but I keep reiterating the point. I'm like, guys, if we believe that, like, in a growth mindset, and we believe that you have to continually like learn new things and then continue to improve, then this is all just part of like us getting better as employees. And I said it's going to make you better at your job here, but to the point we were just having, the conversation we were just having, it may make you better as a more marketable asset in the next stage of your career somewhere else, right? So,
Yes.
so I'm not discouraging that either, right? So, it's something that I, you know, kind of force because some people are a little more resistant to it than others, but I believe so strongly. I'm like, no, we're just going to do it. We're going to measure it. It's going to be part of how we run the team on a quarterly. And like I said, I do it too. It's not like I'm standing up here saying you do something that I don't do. You know, I normally do books. I'm a big believer that leaders are readers, and so I normally pick a book, at least one a quarter, that I read for my goal. But we have LinkedIn courses team can do. We have some other tech training things people can do.
I like that. Yeah. And it's that's one of those things that it's very rare to hear about.
Hmm.
And from a few vectors. One, that you're openly talking about people advancing their careers enough that they might wanna leave and go to another company because you they wanna be in a bigger pond, you
Hmm.
know? Or maybe they wanna go work for a startup, maybe they decide that they actually want a tiny pond, but they wanna be really impactful in that little tiny pond. Um, there's so many ways that can go, and the idea that growth mindset is so critical because execs will say that, but there's not the real inside the company demonstration that you're doing.
Hmm.
So mad props to you for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I find it strange that we as a society, maybe I'll just say it that way, don't in 2026 don't look at things that way, right? I mean, especially in tech. Like, what is the average tenure of a tech employee? Like 3, maybe 5 years, something like that. I mean, this is not, post World War II where everybody got out of college, got a job, worked there till they retired and got a gold Rolex. Like those, that doesn't exist anymore, especially
Right.
not in tech, right? So the reality is most of the people that work for me today are going to have another job post working for me, right? Like that's
Yep.
just the reality of the situation, right? So why not help them prepare for that and support them in that? It's going to make them better while they're here and helps me build a good strong team while we're here. And if I can
Yep.
give them opportunities to where they don't need to leave the organization to go where they need to go in their career. That's my job as a leader. But,
Mhm.
I want to, I want to encourage them to grow in, in their development, for here and for the whatever future role they're going to have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of the, in a way, it's the sports team analogy.
Hmm.
You're coming to join the team. You're going to have a role here. We need you to obviously get better at whatever it is you do. And, but you may leave and go to another team at some point in time. You know,
Hmm.
it's very unusual that somebody is at a sports team for life.
Yep.
That's just such um, an unusual thing to say. That some, like they played their whole career, unless their career is only 2 years. Um,
Yeah.
that they're going to be there for a long period of time. And I think it was, I want to say Netflix. Well, like this was early on. This was one of their core philosophies was we're not a family. We're a sports team. And you're here playing a position on the sports team for a fixed period of time. And then, you're either continuing to get better and playing other roles in the org, or you're out going to a different team.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that explicit conversation that says you're not going to be here for the rest of your life and then getting the gold Rolex,
Hmm.
um, really makes that tangible for people.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, and tech is definitely the volatile, um, probably not as volatile as restaurants, but still pretty volatile. Um, yeah. What question have I not thought to ask you about leadership? What's the thing that you're like, oh my God, I really hope Bill asks me about something and I haven't done it yet?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Like I said, I wanted to make sure I interjected the comment about, learning and
Yeah.
continuous development. But no, I think we've covered it pretty well.
Okay.
I think,
Cool.
maybe one other thing I'll kind of come back to a question you asked earlier about something that kind of surprised me as a leader, or something that maybe I find difficult as a leader, is I think um, most people underappreciate how difficult it is to have to let someone who's not performing go. Right? Like I
Mm,
think for everybody, that's the worst part of leadership, right? Um,
yeah.
it's not it's not easy to let someone go for performance issues. And if you felt like you've done a good job of providing them with very direct feedback, giving them the resources and the support they need to try and improve, and they still don't improve and don't work out, that's not easy. But that at least you feel like you did what you could, and they had some control in the outcome of it. I would say, at least for me personally, and most of the people I have worked with, the worst one is you work for an organization that economy changes, market dynamics change, whatever it may be, and you have to let people who were good performing, good solid people go because of the performance of the organization. That is, for most people, really difficult to do. And I've had people on my team who, like, that happened. We had to let people go, and they're like, I can't be in leadership anymore. Like, I'm never going through that again. I'm never having that conversation with
Mm,
somebody that I know their wife, I know their family, I know like what I just had to do that impacts their life. I can't do that again. Right. And I think a lot of people just underappreciate how difficult that is. And unfortunately, nobody likes that, but can be the part of leadership depending on the situation. Right. So,
yep. Yeah. Yeah. There's the bad news is part of the game. You have to be able to go and do that. Yeah.
mhm, yep.
Yeah. Let that be a
And you can
reminder
still
to
handle it with
everyone.
compassion. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of it is
Yep.
handling it with compassion, but sometimes those tough conversations have to be had, and that's not for everybody. Right. It's
Right.
not
Right.
Leadership's not always glorious. Not every day is great.
Yeah. Yeah. There are definitely going to be sucky days. And I think you have to understand that when you sign up for doing it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've had people ask me, like they wanted to be in leadership or ask me for advice and so forth. And I start asking them, questions about like, why do you want why do you want to be in leadership? What are you wanting to do? If it's just because you want to make more money, at least in tech, there are typically other paths, right? There could be technical leadership paths where you don't actually have to manage people. So the question is really, do you want to be in leadership because you really enjoy coaching and mentoring and helping people succeed and helping people improve their own skill set, or are you after more money and more responsibility? In which case, there are other paths that we can put you on. That neither one is right or wrong. Just you have
Right,
to
right.
understand for yourself, what is it? What is my actual goal? What do I want to accomplish? Where do I want to go in my career?
Yeah. Do you have a process for letting people experiment with leadership?
Not as much as I would love to, because like I said, we're still a fairly small company, so there's only so many opportunities. But we do have what we call a solutions architecture team, which is basically an overlay to our sales team. So they're subject matter experts in various different parts of our product, and so um, they're I would basically like team leads, I guess, for lack of a better term. So they're like, a step above when it comes to comp and pay scale and so forth. A normal person, a normal individual contributor on my team, but they don't have people management responsibility. So it allows them to take on a little more technical ownership without having to actually manage people. And then um, haven't had it yet happen yet, but the thought process we developed the team was that there might be people who did that, who realized, hey, I like this and I also want to manage people, and equally maybe people, like I said earlier, who do that and are like, you know what, this is great, I like this, like, let's just keep doing this. I don't need to actually have to manage these people that I'm working with.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's that one of the things that I think worked really well for for my teams was, um, letting people experiment with leadership.
Hmm.
Like, teaching them, like, "This is what the game looks like. Does it seem interesting?" And then actually putting them in and saying, "Okay, here's a small project, here's a small team. You're the leader. No, if you decide that this sucks and you hate it, I'll be the backstop.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll, you know, I'll take it over. Um, but you get to actually go and run the plays until you get stuck." Um,
Hmm.
and then and the it's the experiment, right? They get to run the
Hmm.
experiment and see if they like managing people, or they come back and they go like, "God, I never want to do that again. Please do not
Yeah.
make me do that ever again." You know,
Yep.
which on the to me is a really good ROI,
Hmm.
because having a team lead who's technically really good but can't manage people has a negative impact for the CFO's perspective. And and I never want that. I want the CFO to like what it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
And so, I can take the risk of doing the experiment, um, and then, oh, great, if you want to continue down that path, cool, let's work that out. And if not, okay, then what are you going to do next? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that saved us.
That was kind of back to my backstory. That's sort of how I got started too. Was technically I was a team lead, but my boss at the time had a lot going on. He's like, "Hey, if you're up for it, I know you want to be in leadership. That's where you want to go with your career. I got other things I need to be focused on anyway. So why don't you kind of quasi run this team? On paper, they'll report to me, but I want you to kind of lean in a little bit and
Yep,
kind of coach and mentor them as the technical leader on this on the sales account." And it'll be kind of like you said, like an experiment towards leadership. If you really like this, then we'll put you on the path towards, actually having these people report to you. If you don't like it, then they still have always reported to me anyway. So it's sort of a try before you buy kind of
yeah,
experiment. I
yeah,
think it worked pretty well.
worked well for you. Yeah,
It did work well for me. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Awesome, cool. I'm looking at the clock. This has been great. Thank you for your time, and I hope
Yeah. Appreciate
I
you
hope
having me.
people enjoyed hearing your stories, and got to wrap their head around some ideas that they might not have had before. Yeah,
Sounds
it's
great.
been awesome.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.